Ever wondered what is the deal with saying l'chaim? Where does it come from? What do we have? Maybe some possible textual basis for it? Well, that's something we're going to explore in this episode of The Jewish Drinking Show, bringing l'chaim to life. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan, and I'm excited to welcome back second time guest to the show, Rabbi Dr. Zvi Ron. Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Ron.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Absolutely. So for those who are less familiar with Rabbi Dr. Ron here, he received smicha from the Israeli chief rabbinate and a PhD in Jewish theology from Spertus University. What was the PhD in?
It was in theology. So yeah, my area was dogma in Jewish belief.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Okay, cool.
The development of the idea that you have to believe certain things or you are not a good Jew.
The Rabbi Dr. Ron also served as Rabbi Knesset Beth Israel Synagogue for 10 years in Richmond, Virginia, along with his wife Sharon. They moved back to Israel in 2004 with their four children and live in Neve Daniel, Gush Etzion. He teaches a number of yeshivot and seminaries in Jerusalem. He is the author of a couple of books on Tanakh in Hebrew, Sefer Katan v'Gadol, and Sefer Ḥakirah about the variable spellings of words in Tanakh. He also has authored dozens of articles in numerous publications. He is the editor of Jewish Bible Quarterly and was a contestant on The Weakest Link, and also, new for 2024, author of a book called Jewish Customs, Exploring Common and Uncommon Minhagim, which also includes an essay about the topic we are discussing today, l'chaim.
Yeah.
I knew about this writing this research of yours based on an article that occurred in Ḥakirah a number of years ago, which people can see right here, l'chaim, number of years ago. When did this article come out? 2022.
2022, yeah.
So it's only 2 years old.
Yeah, it's baby.
It's a baby, right? So it's pretty fresh. Just a couple years out for anybody looking to check that out. PDF is available for free for anybody who would like to download, print out, and see some good Shabbat reading. But you have now updated it. This is a good pitch for your 2024 book that you said you've got an updated version of this essay in this customs book. So.
Yeah.
How did you? So l'chaim, I think it's funny because l'chaim is not in any way an obscure Jewish practice. In fact, it is. In fact, I mean, even in American popular culture, people know this expression. People know this phrase.
Fiddler on the Roof, l'chaim.
Yeah.
TV shows, people know l'chaim, and they know Mazel Tov. Yes, that's what everybody knows.
Right.
However, this is the thing, that there's some customs that are so common that they're taken completely for granted. And if you ask somebody, so why are you saying l'chaim when you're drinking? You know, why are you doing that? And they're like, as opposed to what? You know, you say to life. Like what should be like, why do we have to do that? You know, what's going on over here? Yeah. Now, and I'll tell you that a lot of people sort of relate it to, well, isn't that something that you find everywhere? You know, I don't know, what do they say? Salud, to health, yes? Yeah. And then you have, what is the Irish one? I don't know.
Flant or something?
There you go, which also means something along the lines of health. So you might think, or the British cheers, so you might think that it's just the same thing as everybody else. This is just the Jewish version of, talking about health or something like that. But that's why we have to explore this and find out what really is behind it and what's really going on over here.
Well, so here's the thing: is I did a cursory search of this. I haven't done an exhaustive research by any stretch of the imagination. But most languages, cultures, like you mentioned, have some sort of expression over a cheers of some sort.
Most positivity, yes,
right. They're all positive, and most of them are either about health or life. There are some out there that have nothing to do with health or life. Some actually have to do with the drinking vessel itself, either emptying it or
bottoms up or something along those lines.
So that's more about the beverage container, but but I would say most of them are about the drinkers themselves. And I would even argue that the drinking and the drinker, there's sort of a relationship there, that it should be for health. It should be for life, enjoyment of life.
Some sort of positive vibes. That's right.
Yes.
And I think that the average person would say, well, I guess this is just the Jewish or Hebrew way of doing what everybody else does, right? That is the assumption going in for many people. Now, however,
well, it still could be.
It still could. It still could be, but that's what we're going to explore today. That's what we're really going to explore today. Yeah. I would say the first step is the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat. Now, in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Samech Zayin Amud Bet, Maaseh Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva made a banquet for his son, which is generally assumed this is going to be a wedding. He had a wedding for his son, and every time he would pour a cup for the guests, which we see in the Gemara, it's common to have rabbis pouring wine for guests at a wedding. Even sometimes you see this today, right? Mm-hmm. The father of the bride or comes along with a bottle of schnapps, right? Okay, to the tables, okay. Yeah. And what did he would say? Chamra v'chaye lefum rabbanan, which chamra means literally wine. And chaye life, wine and life to the mouths of the rabbis. Chaye v'chamra, life and wine to the mouths of the rabbis and to the mouths of their students. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. Now people are gonna say, why is this even in the Gemara? Like, in what's the context of telling us something that went on in the festivity? Well, this entire Amud, Daf Samech Zayin Amud Bet, is a long discussion in the Gemara of what is Darkei HaEmori and what is not Darkei HaEmori. Now, let's understand what Darkei HaEmori means. Darkei HaEmori literally means the ways of the Amorites. Now, the ways, that is a phrase that the rabbis use for a superstition. And it is a superstition that is prohibited. Now, this Amud in the Gemara gives all kinds of things that people would do and says about them, either this is Darkei HaEmori, a superstition which is outlawed, or it's actual idolatry of Avodah Zarah and it's outlawed, or it's okay. For example, they say that if a man says, call me by my wife's name, and the wife says, call me by my husband's name, that's Darkei HaEmori, and you're not allowed to do that. Now, why would somebody do that? Presumably, they're worried that some demonic forces are trying to get them, and they want to pull a switcheroo to confuse those things. Another example on that same Amud is that if someone has a chicken that crows like a rooster, says cock-a-doodle-doo like a rooster, and therefore wants to slaughter that chicken because, it is being weird, that's also a superstition and that's prohibited. Similarly, if someone has a rooster that says cock-a-doodle-doo at night and says, oh, there's something wrong, there's a weird rooster here, and that's a superstition. So there's certain things you're not supposed to do because it's superstitious. Then the Gemara brings the Rabbi Akiva thing to say this phrase that Rabbi Akiva said, as you're pouring wine, which is, for life, basically, chaye, an early version of l'chaim, that is not Darkei HaEmori. That's why it's brought in the Gemara. So in other words, there was an idea that people might think, maybe it's superstitious to say these kinds of things over wine, because after all, what does wine have to do with life? I don't know. The Gemara says it is not a superstition. Now, the thing is that, and this also appears in the Tosefta. I think you brought the Tosefta also, right? Yeah? So here we go. Let's look at the Tosefta. Yeah. Again, a story with Rabbi Akiva. He made a party for his son. Every time he opened a barrel of wine, he would say, L'chaye Ravna'a. Yeah, it says, L'chaye Talmidehem. He said, well, here they translate, I don't know, it says, it's really, it's for the life of the rabbis and for the life of their students. So again, there's a l'chaim statement, again, at a wedding, again, with opening wine or opening barrels. Very good. Let's see, the Yerushalmi has yet another example. What does it say there? Rabbi Akiva made a wedding party for his son, Shimon. Every time he would say, Chamra Tava l'Rabbana, right, good wine for the rabbis and their students. Oh, that I guess they mixed up here in the translation of the...
Oh, yeah. Well, they probably took the Yerushalmi and put it into for the translation.
But we see that in the Gemara and the Tosefta and also in the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Akiva is doing this. And even in the Tosefta, The context in the Tosefta is also talking about Darkei HaEmori, and then telling you this is not Darkei HaEmori.
Well,
Now,
so I just want to inject two things. The
sure,
first
sure,
is,
yeah.
so I must have screwed up the Tosefta translation, but I just translate Mishta as just literally a drinking party.
Drinking party. We could say drinking party. That's
Yeah.
fine.
I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
there's an ambiguity there. Could be a wedding. It's
Right.
not
Well,
clear.
yeah,
It's
because
not
it's
clear
for
what the
his
mishta
son. For his
when one's making a mishta for their son, it likely could be either a wedding, could be some sort of other festive celebration on account of their son.
graduation,
Yeah.
something. Okay.
There's a felicitous ambiguity there.
That is right.
Yeah. The other thing I do want to point out, this translation, it's life to the rabbi is life to their students for the Tosefta, which
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right there between the Tosefta and Yerushalmi, both of them are talking about each and every barrel, whereas for the
Yes.
Bavli, it's every cup
Every
poured,
cup that you pour.
which is a lot more frequent.
Right. And which is also a lot more connected to our experience of saying l'chaim. Rather than a barrel situation is not something, we get involved with nowadays all that much, I think.
I mean, I would imagine like opening a bottle. If you're opening a bottle of wine, so you're
right.
kicking open up a new bottle of wine, l'chaim. When you do a subsequent pour, that might not necessitate as much, or otherwise trigger another l'chaim.
Maybe when the champagne pops and somebody yells l'chaim, some
Right.
vibe like that a little bit.
Yeah.
And now the Tosefta has a commentary which is called the Minchat Bikurim. That's, back from the 1800s. And he says that what Rabbi Akiva did is like what we do. He says, yeah, this is saying l'chaim, this is what we do. So now we have a few questions. First of all, I think one question is going to be, why is this brought in the context of superstition? Why would anyone think it was superstitious? The other issue is, where did Rabbi Akiva get it from himself? Now, did he originate this, or it came from even before? So the Chidah has a nice work on the Gemara, on Masechet Shabbat, and in his commentary,
it's Rabbi Chaim David Azulai for those listening.
Right, there you go, right? Born 1724, died 1806, and he writes that Rabbi Akiva himself got it based on something that we have written in the Medrash Tanchuma. Now, this is a wild Medrash Tanchuma, I think, Now, it talks about the whole idea of getting somebody ready who is going to get the death penalty. And what is this? They investigate the ayyim, very good. And then what happens? They take out the person who was supposed to get skila or whatever death penalty there is. And then when they finish interrogating the witnesses and everything, they say a phrase, savri maranan. When they finish interrogating them, and they say savri maranan. Now, savri maranan literally means pay attention, people. Pay attention, rabbis, okay? Like the word svara. Now, we know that phrase from Kiddush. Before you say Kiddush, you say Savri Maranan, like, hey, everyone, pay attention. We're going to say Kiddush. Okay, but here we go, getting ready to give somebody the death penalty. They say Savri Maranan. And then they say, Im l'chaim l'chaim. If the person is sentenced for life, they say l'chaim. If he's sentenced to death, they say lemita. And then the Medrash continues, Im hu mechuyev skila. If the person is supposed to get the death penalty by stoning, mevi'in lo yayin tov vechazak. They give him some strong wine as, I don't know what we'll call it, as a kind of sedative or something before he's going to get the death penalty. So what elements do we have over here? Wild. We have a cup of wine that someone's going to drink. Before that, what are we saying? Savri Maranan. And also, what are we saying? L'chaim, if he's going to be alive, and Lemita, if he's not going to be alive. So these are things that we associate now with Kiddush or something like that, but here it's associated with giving somebody the death penalty. Now, the Medrash itself then has a whole discussion about the death penalty itself,
Mhm.
But then as we continue and continue at the end of this midrash, then they say, well, and here we go. This is the second part that you brought. So too, when the representative of the community, the shliach tzibor, holds a kiddush cup of wine or havdalah, and look at this crazy line, and he's scared of Sam Hamavet. They don't translate
No, you're
that,
right. That is.
right? And he's scared. Now, what's Sam Hamavet? Poison,
Mhm.
right? Or as what in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Grumpy would say, person. Now he says, and if the guy, as he wants to say Kiddush, is scared of poison in the cup, he says Sovri Maranan. And what does the whole audience say? L'chaim. So, in other words, apparently there's an idea that the cup that you're drinking could be involved with high grade negativity, the death penalty. And therefore, when the audience says l'chaim, it's to put positive vibes on something that might otherwise be very, very negative. But what's still not clear, I think, is what does this even mean that the shliach tzibur is worried that there's poison in his cup? I mean, he's not even on trial. Like, what's going on over here?
Mhm.
So to this, we have an interpretation in the Shibule Haleket. Now, the Shibule Haleket is an Italian Rishon from the 1200s. And he writes that this is the whole issue behind what's going on in the Medrash Tanchuma. And he says that wine can do many, many dangerous things. He gives an example. It can lead to shtut, which is stupidity, shikrut, drunkenness. And therefore, he says like this, Al ken hu omer savri mipnei hapachad. That's why before drinking the wine, the person says, everybody pay attention, because he's scared. What's going to happen? I'm going to drink this wine. Slippery slope. Who knows what's going to be over here? And therefore, he says, we all need to focus now because we're entering the danger zone. I want everyone to focus so that with the schut of the rabbim, that's what the Shibboleth like the merit of the masses together, we are going to be able to get through this wine drinking situation unscathed. Oh, and then what does everybody then say? L'chaim. They say, L'chaim tihiyeh lecha otashtia. This drinking should be for life and positivity, velo lehezek, and not for damage. This is going to be a positive experience, not negative. So therefore, in his understanding, when it says that the person making Kiddush is scared that there's poison in the cup, it's not that someone slipped some poison into his cup, but that the wine itself has this negativity potential in it. That is the Sam Hamavet that's embedded in the cup.
I wonder if it's also trying to focus us when we're drinking, that we should have good intentionality around it, and especially out of a concern for the bad stuff to happen. Yeah.
Well, what? Yeah,
out of bad stuff, that whether it's the shtut or whatever.
Sure. And he lists the Shibule Haleket, of course, lists cases with Noach and so on and so forth that we're familiar with where it went bad. So therefore, if we're going back to the end of the Medrash Tanchuma and this understanding, what it says is, oh my goodness, listen to this, that the way we drink the wine is kind of recalling a situation where somebody is faced with doom. And therefore, if you say l'chaim, it would save that guy on death row from doom. And therefore, everyone who is drinking, that's the medrash, right? The actual capital case. And therefore, whenever someone is drinking wine, he's on the precipice of some scary thing happening. And then, so now it's interesting that here it's like the audience all says l'chaim. The Shibule Haleket, he says yayin with drinking wine, yesh bo davar shel tiruf. It has tiruf, which is, gets you out of your mind. Let's call it like that. It mixes you up. So, that's the idea. But what's interesting is that it was the audience here who's saying l'chaim to help out the drinker, to give positive vibes to the drinker, which is, I think, something that we a little bit more find by Sfaradim, that they say Zvi Ron was Chaim, something along those lines. Yes. But with the Gemara, it was Rabbi Akiva. And so now we're going to say that when someone pours l'chaim for somebody, they're saying a l'chaim because they want it to go in a good direction. That's the Shibulei Haleket approach. Yeah. What do you say?
Well, so it's fascinating. Once you mentioned this word approach, I think of, there's the Midrash Tanchuma approach, which is, I like this word of being on the precipice of death. It's also this excitement around, we're not really sure which direction this drinking will lead us, but also maybe a setting of intentions. We want to be on a good path. Right. I think that's one model. I think the other model is just simply the Rabbi Akiva, and whether we're talking about the barrels or we're talking about glasses, but it's simply in celebration. I don't think he's saying this with the Midrash Tanchuma concern in his head. I think it's just simply, let's just enjoy and let life to everybody, whether it's life to the students, life to the rabbis, or even good wine and life to everybody. So
So that's why I brought in the Chida, right? Rav Azulai, he's the one who in his commentary on Masechet Shabbos says Rabbi Akiva is doing this based on the Tanchuma. He makes that link. Like, we don't have to, 100%. But I'll tell you what,
I understand that they can be meshed.
Yeah. But
I think they're a different model.
It doesn't have to be.
Hey there, I hope you're enjoying this episode featuring Rabbi Dr. Zvi Ron on saying l'chaim. If you like Jewish textual exploration and having l'chaims, well, you might be interested in next week's episode. And here's a sneak peek featuring Rabbi Dov Linzer speaking about Rav Moshe's teshuvot on whiskey.
The reason this is forbidden is because it has a status of wine. And wine is a social drink. This has a status in the role that it plays as a social drink. And it's not just considered to be like fermented grape juice. So, for example, there are some halachot that if you cook the wine, it might not become, it doesn't become stam yenam, because cooked wine didn't play the same role. Well, when water dilutes the wine so much that it's less than 1/6, it stops being wine. You don't say that I have water here with traces of wine in it. You say I have some grape beverage.
Hope you enjoyed that sneak peek, and I hope you come back to check out that episode. Now back into this episode featuring Rabbi Dr. Zvi Ron.
I do want to also mention Tosfot. Now, there is a commentary on Chumash called Perush Balei HaTosfot. Okay, commentary of Tosfot. It appears in certain editions of Mikrot Gdolot have it as well. It's very nice. And in Vayikra, Perek Yud, Tosfot gets into this whole thing about drinking wine. There, they mention that the Gemara in Eruvin, Samech Hey Amud Aleph, has this idea that Rav Chanan says, which is, Lo nivra yain ela lenachem avelim. The purpose of wine is to comfort mourners. And based on this, there's an idea that you would drink in a setting of mourning and sadness and death. And therefore, when you're not drinking in that situation, it's almost like, I will say, an ayin hara kind of a thing. In other words, if it's something that's usually done in a house of mourning, as Lo nivra ella, it was only created for this purpose. So then when you're not doing it that way, then you say l'chaim. We're doing this for life and not for like a mourning vibe. Yeah, but go ahead. Yes.
Well, that's one of the two reasons that he offers there in the Gemara. The other is to pay the wicked in this world.
Yes. Also that the wicked should suffer in this world and have harm come to them. Yes.
Well, no, they're rewarded.
Or to enjoy something.
They enjoy it here.
Get their olam haba wiped out. Yes.
Right.
Which is, I think, all of it kind of has negative vibes for good people. Let's say. Now, what's interesting is based on this concept. If you look in, there's a work from the 1600s by Rav Chaim ben Vinisti called Shayarei Knesset Hagdolah, and there he says that he saw that rabbis, he's talking about one certain rabbi, Rav Astruk from Bulgaria, that when he would give wine, he would say, besimchatchem. He wouldn't say l'chaim, he would say besimchatchem, which is a little bit closer to how we were saying, sometimes it's health and sometimes it's happiness, like cheers. But again, he connects it to the idea that it could be sometimes in a negative situation, like a mourning situation. That's why we have, besimchatchem. So the main thing is that you have to say something positive here to sort of ward off the potential negativity. You find this also in the Maharal. The Maharal, in his comments to this Gemara, the Maharal has a running Perush commentary on all the Agadic parts of the Gemara, or most of them. And there he also says, he says sometimes wine has context of negativity in Tanakh, where, like in Yeshayahu, kos chamato, the cup of God's wrath. So therefore, and he writes even this line, Bishat hamishte, during a party, beyoter, more so, hasatan mekatreg. The Satan comes out and, makes trouble, we'll call it, So therefore you say, look, as to make the positive happen. Now, based on this, sometimes you find in Hasidic sources that they say that really l'chaim you only say on wine, because this entire discussion from the Tanchuma to the Gemara to the Tosefta to everybody was always on wine. I don't know if you've ever seen this, that people are makpid that they don't say l'chaim on beer, that they say l'chaim on wine, not on beer. But there's sources about that. Now, however,
I was going to say, reading your article was the first time I encountered that.
Oh, okay, yeah. Now, but however, there's a work from the early 1900s called Otsar Komin Hagei Yeshurun, and there he writes that liquor today has the same function and potential trouble as wine, and therefore you say l'chaim over liquor. So apparently it's wine and liquor, which is interesting because in Hebrew, the term for liquor is yash, which is, burnt wine, yain saruf. So it's like the wine family, that has. So it would seem, so let's put it this way. We can, on the one hand, give a simple explanation that this is just Jewish people doing what everybody else in the world does, which is, hey, happiness, life, health, and all of that. But we'll see at least that within the context of, the Medrash and commentaries, they wanted to give it, let's call it a deeper kind of reason, and maybe like a warning label. Like this functions as a warning label for wine.
Hey there, I wanted to break in yet again. Although I asked for support in financial ways because it does cost some money to make the hosting happen and other aspects of Jewish drinking happen. So your financial support is definitely appreciated. And don't forget, you can go to jewishdrinking.com/donate. But also, another way of supporting the show and everything that Jewish Drinking does is also to tell your friends, tell your neighbors. If you like this content, if you like this show, maybe people also like it. So feel free to let them know, hey, I have this interesting episode I heard, or a few episodes, or whatever it is, or even a few clips. Feel free to share with your friends. All right, thank you so much. Now back into the show.
There's one other thing that we still have to get to, which is that the Gemara brought Rabbi Akiva in the context of Darkei HaEmori, and telling you that this is not a Darkei HaEmori, this is not a superstition, and this is something legitimate. So why would anyone think that it's a superstition? And the reason for that is that we do find in Greek and Roman literature, when they would have their feasts, the symposium and all of this, where they would have cups of wine that they would drink, and in a certain order and in certain proportions. It was like a whole thing. That part of it is that they would drink wine to either, it depends on, if you're Greek or Roman, either to Zeus or to Jupiter. Yes. And you would, and because he was considered the god that taught people how to mix drinks. That was their tradition. And also, there would be a cup of wine that people would drink for Hygeia. Hygeia, the goddess of health. So if you would drink to Hygeia, the goddess of health, then after that you would drink to the health of the mortal friends. Once you acknowledge the god of health, then you could talk about people's health. Now, this ancient Greek and later Roman practice sounds, I mean, could be borderline or maybe not even borderline avodah zarah. Like if you, so imagine if somebody would, instead of drinking to Hygeia, the goddess of health, as they pick up their drink, they would just say to health. So then you're like, wait a minute, maybe this started out as, you know, some kind of pagan-y thing, but now we just have the health thing. That's why the Gemara had this concern. So therefore, what we're going to say is that the concern in the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, and the whole reason why what Rabbi Akiva did was even put in a list of possible Darkei HaEmori, is because Chazal were familiar with the Greek and Roman practices that when they would drink, they would pay honor to Hygeia, the goddess of health. And therefore, there was a concern that mentioning health or long life, along with the drinking of wine, might be, you know, a pagan or superstitious type practice. And therefore, the Gemara wants to explicitly say it is not that way. So that's why the rabbinic literature takes such great pains to cast this saying of L'chaim in a Jewish specific kind of context of you know, giving positivity to the experience of drinking because of concerns that are found in the Torah, in the Tanakh, and in Jewish practice of drinking this in a house of mourning and things of this nature, because they didn't want the let's call it Jewish reading audience to view the saying of L'chaim, or what Rabbi Akiva did, as just another version of the general kind of thing that goes on all over the world, because in their world, that was connected to pagan aspects, which they wanted to distance from. So now we're going to say, and therefore, at least from the Jewish religious literature, the L'chaim is infused with a moral message, you know, rather than, you know, simply saying, let's all have a good time. Yeah.
Well, I see it as a yes and. I see both. I think there's an interior value to it. I think what you're saying, as far as pushing out the Darkei Emori concern, saying you might have a concern about this, yet it's actually okay.
It's okay, yes.
Right. So I think I see that as sort of, you know, fending off that concern. But more on the interior, I think there is something really wonderful to say about life, whether it's, you know, life to the rabbis, life to their students, life to whomever is on the receiving end of this cup, barrel, whatever it is. I think there's something incredibly lovely about that in general. And then I think in quite particular, whether it's the cup for the Bavli version or the barrel for the both Yerushalmi and Tosefta versions, there is something to be celebrated. This is a life-giving moment of sorts. And not only that, not only just life in general, but I think also let's live it up. Let's have a great time. Life is meant to be enjoyed. And this is an incredible way to really seize that opportunity.
Now I'll say that is expressed in the Shlah. The Shlah HaKadosh in the
Rabbi Horowitz.
Yes. Horowitz. Now in the Shlah HaKadosh, it's a massive work. There's a section called Kedushat HaAchila, the sanctity of eating. And in the sanctity of eating, he also talks about the sanctity of drinking. And he makes reference to the whole Rabbi Akiva episode. And he said that what Rabbi Akiva meant, you know, for the rabbis and the students, he says in particular, why is he talking to the rabbis and their students? What about the average Joe guy? So he says, because for the rabbis, it's important that there will be tachlit tova hanimshach mizeh. There is something good that can come out of the drinking of wine for the rabbis. Maybe it'll, expand their mind a little bit, make connections that they didn't see before, something along those lines, which sounds like what you're saying, or a similar kind of an idea, that we want to tap into the positivity of this festive experience and channel it in a good way. And then that's, we want the rabbis to take advantage of this. That's how the shlosh is. But that's a nice kind of shluck thing to say in Kedushat HaAchila. It's very positive vibes there.
Since you published this 2 years ago, have you received interesting feedback, questions, other people providing other sources?
No, you would be surprised.
Okay.
I normally get very, very little feedback, I will say.
Oh, wow.
Occasionally somebody says, that's nice, or, I read all your stuff and it's nice. But,
Okay.
people just read it and move on with their lives, apparently.
It sounds like it's a good pitch for people to provide feedback to you.
Yeah, you could write me, you could find me and
No,
write
like
me.
I know, like I really greatly enjoyed many years ago your Covered Mirrors article, which was so deeply fascinating to me.
Yeah. And it's funny because somebody did write to me a few years ago. I was at a Shiva house and someone said a Dvar Torah and it was based on your thing. And then I read it and thank you and whatever. So sometimes
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
But so I just hope for the listening audience, the next time, this is the Jewish drinking show. So apparently people are saying L'chaim left and right. The audience here is so maybe now there's a bit of an extra layer to that L'chaim, that they're.
Before we go,
Yes.
This Rabbi Dr. Ron, is there anything you would like to promote?
Well, I have my new book, Jewish Customs, that came out, and you just put in Jewish Customs on my name, Zvi Ron, Zviron. You can get it on Amazon or the Koren website. It's a massive book, more than 400 pages long. It got, an index and everything, legit.
Do you want to share, what are a few essays that you want to highlight in the book?
Well, we talk about how, for example, the idea of the bride circling the Chatan, how that moved from the original, which is 3 times, to 7 times that we do today, and why we do it at all, and what does 3 mean, and what was the original meaning of it, and how did it shift over time? Also, we have a nice discussion there of the history and reasons given for walking out during Yizkor if you do not have a relative who passed away. And we try to find the original reason for that, as we always do with all of these things. So those are things that I think that could be of interest to people.
Oh, very neat. All right. Well, Rabbi Dr. Ron, this has been insightful. This has been fascinating.
It's always a blast. Always a blast to be on the show. Thank you.
Wonderful. And with that, we're going to say L'chaim.
L'chaim.